Are you thinking about growing your own scallions? Well, I would imagine that if you clicked on this video, the answer is probably yes. So today, let's talk about 3 reasons to grow scallions, and I will share how I place them strategically in my garden. Welcome to True Freedom Permaculture, where I show you all the tips and tricks you need to have a green thumb, even if you weren't born with one. The first reason to grow scallions is that they pack a powerful punch of onion flavor without having to commit to the process of growing your own large bulb onions. And I do grow those as well, and it's very rewarding. I like doing it, but I do think it's more work than just growing scallions or doing the spring onions. Because if you do the bulb onions, then first of all, it's a longer growing season because they have to develop that big beautiful bulb that we eat, and then you have to cure them, and then you have to have a place to store them as well after they've cured. So it does take a little bit more legwork, whereas scallions, they're really pretty easy. They don't require as much maintenance, and also they don't require as much food. Bulb onions are heavy feeders, and so I find that I have to fertilize them either via compost or organic fertilizer fairly often throughout the season. Whereas with scallions, I don't do much prep other than when I prepare the bed. Like this past year, I prepared the bed for them in the previous fall. And whenever I do that, I always add like a layer of compost, or if I don't have enough compost, I'll use organic fertilizer. And that's the only time that I had to feed them. I will say that they do require water though. Scallions tend to dry out, and you'll notice that they tend to get a little crispy is the best descriptor that I can think of. They get a little brown and dry at the ends if they're not getting enough water. So I do think a deep watering once a week is required. Now, I mentioned I would talk about how I use scallions strategically in my edible landscape. And what I do is I use them as a border. So sometimes you hear people using marigolds as a border for their garden beds. Well, I do that sometimes, but I also like using scallions. You kind of create like a little edible fence around the garden beds. And just like with some humans, the smell and the taste will deter some pests as well. Now, it will be more effective if you plant the scallions along the entire perimeter of your garden bed. I have smaller garden beds, and I had things that I was growing from either seeds or very small seedlings. So I only planted my scallions along the northern and the eastern borders of my garden beds, but it still worked out really well. So just keep that in mind too, that unless you have a pretty well-established plant, you don't want them to get shaded out like your tiny seedlings or something like that you're actually putting inside the garden bed. You don't want those to get shaded out by your growing scallions. Now, the third reason why I prefer growing scallions over buying them at the store is that I think of them as more of an herb than a vegetable. So when I go to use scallions for a recipe, I might use 1, maybe 2 at the most, usually. And when you go to the store, they're usually kind of like bundled together. So you have like 4 or 5 or 6 scallions, which is too many for me to use at one time. So that's why I like growing them, because I could just go out, and it was actually a way of thinning them out because I plant my scallions kind of in small bunches. I would just grab 1 or 2 as needed and cut them up and use it for whatever recipe I needed them for. Also, if I was just making something like eggs in the morning, but I wanted some scallions in them, I would use like a cut and come again technique where I would just take off a couple of the green leaves at a time, snip those up and put them into, like I said, the eggs or whatever. But I didn't even need like a full scallion, and that way it would regenerate because I wasn't taking out the root, the white part. I was leaving that in the ground. So that's a third reason why it's great to grow your own. Now here's a bonus one. I have seen people growing scallions in water, just water. And so if you're someone that doesn't have any ground to grow in, or you can't even do like containers of scallions, I've seen people where they have like just the white part, and then it constantly regenerates the green leaves, and they just keep harvesting those over and over again. It's not something that I've looked into personally, just because I do have the ground to grow it in and I like doing it that way. I would be curious as far as the nutritional value, whether or not that is the same, using just water versus water and soil? Because I could be wrong. If you know the answer, let me know. Let us know, all of us, in the comments. But I would think that it would get some nutrients from the soil, the growing matter, whatever the scallion's growing in. But anyway, that can be a really great option, like I said, if you do not have the ground to plant them in. So all that's left to do now is go ahead and just get those scallions started. Plant your seeds, get them germinating, think about where they will fit best in your edible landscape. I will see you all again soon.